My name is Cecile Miller. I am 32 years old and work as an analyst at an investment bank in New York. From the outside, my life undoubtedly appears ideal. I have a solid career, a comfortable apartment, and a loving husband. However, life always has its hidden aspects. I have a younger sister. Her name is Melinda. She is 3 years younger than me and presently studies psychology at a local university. Melinda has always been the golden kid in our family. Even as youngsters, the contrast in how we were treated was clear. No matter how brilliantly I did, it was simply as anticipated. If Melinda got ordinary performance, it was something to be applauded. These subtle but continuous contrasts burned themselves firmly into my heart. One memory stands out most vividly: the day of my high school graduation. I graduated at the top of my class and delivered a speech on stage. My parents were there during the wedding, but they departed immediately after, stating they had to attend Melinda's theatrical performance. They did not even attend my graduation celebration. Oddly enough, though, I was never able to harbor resentment toward Melinda. Like me, she was a victim of our dysfunctional family dynamic. She must have been burdened by our parents' overbearing expectations and partiality as well. She was compelled to conceal her actual identity because she was always expected to be the ideal daughter. I purposefully chose a distant college when it came time to make my decision. I discovered a whole new universe at New York University when I studied economics. There, I was just Cecil, free to make my own way in the world, and no one regarded me as Melinda's elder sister. I put a lot of effort into my studies, earned money from part-time jobs and scholarships to pay for my tuition, and maintained stellar grades throughout my 4 years at the university. In order to avoid feeling obligated to my parents, I minimized their financial assistance. I got a job at a Wall Street investment bank after I graduated. Sam Davis, who would eventually become my husband, and I met him there. He was a seasoned analyst who guided me through the onboarding process. I had never met someone so understanding as Sam. He paid close attention as I talked about my complex family relationships. "We can't choose our family, but we can choose how we face them," he said, and I found some great solace in that. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Despite its modest size, the wedding was intimate and sincere. My parents and Melinda attended, although they seemed rather nervous. My mother, in particular, had a look on her face throughout the ceremony, as if she wanted to say something. Our careers were doing well, and our lives were secure after the wedding. Melinda was accepted to a nearby university during this time, so I made the decision to set aside a portion of my earnings to assist with her tuition. It was an act of pure affection for my sister. I wanted her to concentrate on her education without having to struggle like I had. However, life has a way of betraying our good intentions, and these betrayals frequently come in the most surprising ways. That fatal evening began with an ordinary dinner invitation. My mother had called, stating that Melinda had an important news and wanted the family to have supper together. I received the call while sitting at my desk at work, absorbed in the examination of quarterly financial data. I didn't immediately pick up on the strange joy in my mother's voice. "Melinda has some wonderful news," she continued, sounding as if she had just won the jackpot. "Let's celebrate together tonight." I looked at my calendar and sighed silently. I made the decision to reschedule my crucial conference call with a significant customer for the following day. Refusing to attend a family get-together would just provide my mother with more justification for her months-long passive-aggressive conduct. "All right, what time should I be there?" 7 o'clock. Her voice was full of excitement as she said, "Your father will also be home early. Sam will come too, right?" Yes, I'll let him know." I wrapped up work early, went home, took a shower, and changed into a moderately formal outfit. Sam was already ready and sitting in the living room, watching the news. "Are you ready?" He smiled warmly at me. "Yes," I replied while giving myself a final check in the mirror. "I bet we'll be hearing about another one of Melinda's accomplishments." Sam stood up and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, I'm here for you." Those remarks, as usual, reassured me. Sam has been my emotional support throughout every one of our family reunions. We arrived at my parents' place just at 7:00 p.m. As soon as I opened the door, I could hear the sounds of laughter and chatter from within. My parents and Melinda were already assembled in the living room. Melinda welcomed us with her usual charming grin. She had grown into a lovely woman, her long black hair, flawlessly sculpted face, and glowing aura easily drew others in. It wasn't hard to envision her being popular at the institution. Cecil. Melinda rushed to her feet and grabbed me fiercely. She was surrounded by the smell of pricey perfume. "We've been waiting for you." My mother came out of the kitchen grinning warmly, but I couldn't tell if she was grinning at Melinda or at me. "Come on, everyone, have a seat," she said, pointing to the table with the food spread out. "Everything's ready." She gave us instructions, and we sat down. My father, as usual, sat at the head of the table, barely acknowledging us with a brief nod while keeping his eyes on the newspaper. Once the lunch began, Melinda took a deep breath and made her news. "I'm pregnant." My fork was hanging in midair when I froze. Melinda had just begun her second year of college. Although she was an adult legally, wasn't she still too young? But my concerns didn't seem to matter, as my parents reacted with a kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for winning prestigious awards. "Congratulations," my mother exclaimed, almost shouting. "That's wonderful." My father was beaming with pride today, even though he almost ever looked away from the newspaper. A grandkid. What great news! I remained silent, observing the scene. There was a flicker of unease in Melinda's expression, but my parents were too caught up in their excitement to notice. "Who's the baby's father?" I asked quietly. Melinda blushed slightly and answered, "We're still in the middle of discussing things." Something about her answer felt off to me. Dinner proceeded as my folks talked on and on about Melinda's pregnancy. They talked future plans, preparations, and most of all, how fantastic a mother Melinda would be. It was as if I didn't exist in the room. After supper, I excused myself to the toilet. On my way back, I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen. Normally, I would have walked by, but something about my mother's tone made me pause. Never tell Cecile about Melinda's mistake. My heart seemed to halt at that moment. There was no warmth in her voice, simply a stiff earnestness. "Exactly," my father added. "We can't let Cecile find out." Standing in the shadows of the hallway, I listened as the truth unfurled. My parents were aware of Melinda's involvement with my husband, Sam, but they decided to keep me in the dark. That moment utterly rocked my existence. My body became as frigid as ice, and I had trouble breathing. My heart ached from the betrayal, and the walls seemed to be closing in on me. After regaining control of my body, I went back to the living room and informed everyone that I needed to go home since I wasn't feeling well. I was unable to look Sam in the eyes, but he appeared worried. I didn't say anything throughout the drive home. Sam made many attempts to talk to me, but I remained glued to the window and only gave terse answers. I had trouble sleeping that night. The knowledge that everything I had constructed in my life was based on a horrible falsehood overcame me as I lay there and stared at Sam, who was sleeping next to me. However, by the time daybreak arrived, I had come to the realization that I needed to face this treachery and find the whole truth. I got up early in the morning. The time was 5 in the morning. Slipping out of bed, I walked stealthily to the living room. I opened my laptop as the first rays of the day came in. I typed in private investigation agencies in New York, and dozens of results came up in a matter of seconds. I sent inquiry emails to each of the 3 highly regarded companies after narrowing it down to just 3. Just after 9 in the morning, the first answer came in. Wagner Investigations was the source. The email offered a free introductory consultation and was succinct and professional. I made an appointment for that afternoon right away. Using the excuse that I had a client appointment, I left work early and went to a Manhattan office building. After riding the elevator to the 12th story, I came to a door marked unobtrusively Wagner Investigations. Brad Wagner wasn't quite who I thought he would be. He didn't look like the tough cops you see in television shows. Rather, he had the aura of a mid-50s gentleman, a professor at a university. He began in a kind manner. "Miss Cecile, could you explain the situation in detail?" I described everything, including the discussion I heard last night and the ensuing apprehension and confidence. Brad listened critically, taking notes every now and then as I talked. When I was done, he summarized. "So your request can be broken down into two main objectives. 1. Collecting evidence of your husband's relationship with your sister, and 2. Gathering proof of your parents' cover-up." The answer was, "Yes, that's correct." "This is a delicate case," he said, picking his words carefully. "Considering the fact that it involves family, we'll need to be extremely cautious in how we collect the evidence. How much will it cost?" The base cost is around $1,500. The amount of investigating days will determine the total. Depending on the circumstances, additional fees can be incurred. I paused for a second after hearing the sum. Although it wasn't cheap, I believed that in order to get the truth, it was worth the expenditure. "Please proceed." Brad gave a thorough explanation of the investigative strategy once the contract was signed. He talked about combining a number of techniques, including conducting interviews, keeping an eye on technological devices, and picture surveillance. I started living a double life on that day. I pretended to be a clueless wife while secretly waiting for the investigator to provide me with updates. 5 days after the inquiry started, the first report was received. Pictures of Sam and Melinda meeting at a cafe close to her campus were included to the email. They were clearly more than simply in-laws based on their intimate facial gestures. Security footage of the two entering and exiting a hotel, messages between the two, and the most important piece of evidence, a testimony from Melinda's friend, all continued to come in. In the recorded testimony, her friend stated, "Melinda talked to me several times about her relationship with Sam. She seemed confused at first, but eventually she got deeply involved." The proof of my parents' involvement, however, was the most startling finding. Melinda and they exchanged messages outlining plans to hide the affair from me, and the motivation behind it all became evident. My assistance with Melinda's college tuition has grown to be a vital source of financial support for my parents. They were afraid that I would stop providing them with that assistance as soon as the truth was out. I was just a wallet, nothing more. An unanticipated chance arose as the evidence kept mounting. Melinda's pregnancy was to be celebrated with a party. The idea was already starting to take shape in my head when my mother called to tell me. She said, "We want it to be a lovely party," in an animated tone. "Melinda's friends will be there too, and of course, I have a few tasks I'd love your help with." "Of course," I simply said. "I'm happy to help in any way I can." Nothing I said was false. I really wanted to assist, but not in the manner my mother had in mind. Preparations for the celebration moved nicely. The site was my parents' house, slated for Saturday at 2 p.m. Around 30 people, mainly family relations, and Melinda's close acquaintances were invited. Everything had been carefully prepared by my mother. On the surface, I assisted with the preparations, acting as the loyal elder sister. I helped with the invitations, catering planning, and decoration selection. As more evidence from the detective kept coming in, I made sure to always live up to my mother's expectations. The texts that Melinda and my parents exchanged were the most fascinating. They had been planning how they were going to approach me. "We can't let Cecil find out," one of my mother's messages to Melinda. She's paying for your tuition. If she stops because of this, we'll be in big trouble." Reading that message erased any lingering doubt within me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated exploitation. On the day of the party, I arrived at my parents' house early. I wore a warm smile and efficiently helped with the final preparations, playing the role of the perfect hostess. "Cecile, thank you so much," my mother said, wrapping an arm around my shoulder with satisfaction. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But her words no longer warmed my heart as they once did. Instead, I was filled with cold, unwavering determination. The party started at 2 o'clock p.m., as planned. Guests began arriving one after another, and soon the living room was filled with laughter and cheerful conversations. Melinda, glowing with what appeared to be maternal bliss, graciously accepted all the congratulations and well wishes. As the time for presenting gifts approached, I quietly slipped upstairs and retrieved the materials I had prepared. The evidence was meticulously organized: photographs, message records, and proof of my parents' cover-up. All of it was nicely placed within a beautifully wrapped box. "It's time for presents," my mother called out cheerfully. "Melinda, everyone has chosen something special for you." One by one, gifts were unwrapped amid ecstatic reactions: baby clothing, toys, parenting manuals. Each present was thoughtful and packed with affection. Finally, it was my turn. "This is my gift to you, Melinda," I said, speaking in a calm voice. "I prepared this with special meaning." Melinda nodded excitedly, her eagerness clear. But the instant she opened the box, her expression froze. Her palms began to quiver as soon as she saw the first photo inside. The colorful snapshot plainly showed her and Sam in a tight hug. A couple of the visitors began noting Melinda's abrupt transformation. "Melinda, what's wrong?" my mother said with worry, but her voice too was eventually hushed. The contents of the images were gradually becoming obvious to others around us. "This is my special gift to you," I said, my voice firm. "All the evidence gathered by the private investigation agency showing your relationship with Sam." I stopped and turned to look at my parents. As a result of Mom and Dad's attempts to hide it, their features had already turned pale. There was such a profound quiet in the room, as if the air had frozen. The only sound was Melinda's quiet crying. "Cecile, please let me explain," she pleaded, her voice quivering. "Explain," I answered, controlling my feelings. "With the mountain of evidence I've collected over 2 weeks, what explanation could you possibly offer?" Sam's face was devoid of color as he stood still like a stone. His lips were quivering a little, as I could see. With a start, my father said, "This is a misunderstanding," raising his voice. "Calm down, Cecil. Family concerns shouldn't be discussed in front of so many people. Family matters." For the first time, I raised my voice and interrupted him. "Who do you believe has been covering Melinda's tuition costs?" "Me." "You're still claiming this is a family issue after deceiving me, even though I've been paying for her costs since I started working?" I stopped my mother's attempt to step in by raising my hand. "That's sufficient. Take a look at this." I showed them the messages that Mom and Melinda had exchanged on my phone. "Cecil must never discover that she is the one covering your college costs. We'll be in big danger if she quits because of this." As soon as I read aloud my mother's note, the room was filled with murmuring. Melinda's companions looked at one another uneasily, clearly confused. "I was just a wallet to you," I murmured, sounding both angry and heartbroken. A convenient sister who kept paying for her younger sibling's education, and that same sister's husband was. Then it came, all of a sudden, there was anarchy. "You're disgusting." Anger-filled, Melinda's boyfriend yelled and rushed at Sam. In addition to her relationship with Sam, Melinda had been seeing a male classmate. "You seduced Melinda, and now you're pretending like nothing happened. Say something." Sam was about to reply when his face was struck by the boyfriend's fist. Sam fell backward against the table, stumbling. A chain reaction was triggered by the hit. There was utter mayhem in the room. "This bastard." Sam stood up, grabbed the boyfriend, and lunged at him, as my parents desperately attempted to regain control of the situation. Melinda broke down in tears. However, it was too late. With irate and incredulous voices, the guests were gradually assembling the truth. "How did this occur? It's unbelievable. How could you have done that?" In the midst of the confusion, I stood quietly. Was this what I had hoped for? A tornado of nuanced feelings swirled within me. Melinda kept crying and leaned on my parents for comfort. Her meticulously styled hair was now a mess, and tears had smudged her makeup. There was no sign of the radiant image of a renowned soon-to-be mother. With blood streaming from his nose, Sam struggled to stand again, but the weight of the icy, critical looks around him prevented him from doing so. "Cecil," my mother called out to me in a trembling voice. "Please, no more." But I had already turned my back. As I walked toward the front door, I delivered my final words. "Melinda's tuition support ends today. I'll start the divorce process with Sam tomorrow." I paused briefly, looking back. "Don't ever contact me again." I stepped outside, where the evening sky was beautifully painted in shades of orange and pink. It was as if the commotion from the preceding several hours had been nothing but a lie. But the noise still echoing from the house confirmed that this was all too real. I got into my car and exhaled deeply before starting the engine. It was over. No, this was the beginning. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I reminded myself of that. In the back seat lay copies of the evidence, photographs, message logs, and documentation gathered through the detective's investigation. I had spent over $1,500 on the investigation, a steep cost, but one I deemed necessary to uncover the truth. As I pulled out of the driveway, I peered in the rearview mirror, watching my parents' house disappear into the distance. The house I had lived in for over 20 years now felt like a stranger's home. There was no place for me there anymore. As the street lights began to flicker on one by one, I took my first step toward a new life. A week has gone since the celebration. At that time, my phone was packed with dozens of missed calls and unread messages, but I hadn't answered to a single one. Instead, I had spent the week working on reconstructing my life. The first thing I did was schedule an appointment with my lawyer. With the overwhelming proof, I had the divorce processes were supposed to move smoothly. Even Sam's reaction came unusually swiftly, agreeing to the divorce without any fight. He undoubtedly wanted to prevent more controversy. As for asset partition, it will be shared equally by default, the lawyer indicated. However, considering the facts you've obtained, there's space for bargaining on more favorable conditions. I made a transfer request at work. It was no longer a possibility to stay in the same department where Sam worked. Fortunately, a position had emerged in the London branch's intermediate team, a position they had given me before. "Cecile, you're welcome anytime," said the London HR director with a pleasant smile over the video chat. "We're well aware of your accomplishments." I didn't spend any time in taking care of my housing circumstances either. The opulent Manhattan apartment was replete with memories of Sam. Rather, I discovered a Brooklyn loft, a refurbished area in a former factory. It featured big open rooms, enormous windows, and most importantly, the right environment for a fresh start. But the most significant change was the one happening within me. The dependence and emotional attachment I had carried toward my family for years were slowly unraveling, like a heavy chain being lifted. For about 2 weeks, my parents persisted in trying to reach me. Emails, phone calls, even unexpected visits to my home. However, I didn't answer any of them. Melinda apologized to me multiple times, but I ignored them and deleted them. My mother begged in a frantic voicemail, "Cecile, please listen to us. We are related. Can't we?" But I wasn't moved by those words either. Never before had the word family sounded so meaningless. When an unexpected visitor arrived one day, I threw myself into my work and concentrated on my fresh start. It was Carol, Melinda's closest friend. She had known Melinda and me since we were kids and lived close by. "Could you spare a moment to talk?" Carol was in the office lobby, waiting for me. I consented to listen to her when we relocated to a nearby cafe. The words "Melinda has dropped out of college" were spoken quietly by Carol. "She's moved back into your parents' house and started working part-time." I stirred my coffee in silence. "She really regrets everything," Carol went on to say. "However, I agree with your choice. There are instances when this is the only way to reveal the truth." Carol's words struck a deep chord with me out of the blue. She was one of the few who could look at the situation completely objectively. "Thank you," I replied briefly, "but I'm not going back." There was no hesitation in my voice. 2 years had passed since then. Living in London has brought countless changes into my life. A new environment, new people, and most importantly, a new version of myself. Work has been more fulfilling than I could have imagined. Collaborating with colleagues from diverse cultural backgrounds has expanded both my skills and my worldview. My career progressed quickly, and I am now the head of my department, leading major projects. My relationship with my parents and Melinda remains severed. Occasionally, I hear updates about them through mutual acquaintances, but it feels like listening to stories about strangers. Melinda never returned to college. She now works at a local supermarket and is raising her child as a single mother. My parents are busy helping her with childcare. The divorce from Sam took a year to finalize, but it's all settled now. I heard he left the company and relocated to the West Coast. Over these past 2 years, I've lost many things, but I've gained something far more valuable: self-trust, the courage to make decisions, and most importantly, the freedom to choose my own path in life. This is my new life, and this story is not an ending, but a new beginning. Sometimes life's greatest challenges come from those closest to us, but beyond those challenges lies a new light waiting to be discovered. I now know that firsthand.